One of the things that happens to people all the time in their life is that they get to where they're going and then they don't know what to do. For example, you graduate from university. It's like, okay, story over. Who are you now? Who are you the next day? So what happens is when you succeed, then there's a success crisis. And the success crisis is, well, I've run this story to its end. What you should do when your story comes to an end, when you've achieved what it is that you want to achieve, then the next question is, okay, well, now I'm that person or I have that character. What do I need to do next? And some of that is always, well, what do I need to give up? You know, one of the experiences I've had in my life, fairly commonly, in a variety of different ways, this is especially true when I was paying a lot of attention to my dreams, which I did for about 15 years, I guess, something like that. Now and then I would feel like I'd learned some things and had sort of consolidated them, and then before I went to sleep, I'd think, okay, I'm ready to learn something else. And I didn't say that without trepidation, and because usually when you learn something, you know, it's not that pleasant, because you usually learn something about why you're wrong. And the deeper the thing that you learn, the more you learn about why you're wrong. And there's a death that's associated with that, because then you have to let that part of you that's wrong die. That's the sacrifice. And so you have to be willing to make a sacrifice before you're going to learn something. What you'll learn is in proportion to your willingness to make a sacrifice. And I really do believe that. I do believe that as well, because I also think that if you commit to something, that means that you don't do a bunch of other things, right? So that's the sacrifice of all those other things. You commit to it and you set your sights on it. If you really commit to it and you get the sacrifice right, so to speak, then the probability that that thing will be successful vastly increases. One of the things you see with people all the time is that maybe they're trying to stumble forward towards their ideal, as poorly defined as it might be, but then they're afraid, right? They're afraid about what they might encounter, and that stops them, because fear does stop people. It freezes you like a prey animal. People move ahead, but then they get afraid, and then they stop moving ahead. And that's not so good, because negative emotion is a really powerful motivator. So we're more motivated by negative emotion than positive emotion, quantitatively speaking. That's, I think, because we can only be so happy, but we can really be suffering and dead, you know? So we have to pay more attention to the negative. And that's bad, because the negative can stop you. And then in my clinical practice, you know, I often talk to people who are trying to make a difficult life decision, and they're weighing out the costs and the benefits of making the life decision, you know? And one of the things I always talk to them about is, wait a second, that's an incomplete analysis. You have to weigh out the benefits and the costs of doing this. And you have to weigh out the costs and benefits of not doing that. And that's not the same as the zero that you assume that you're starting with. Because to not make a decision also has a cost. And sometimes the cost of not making a decision is far worse than the cost of making a decision, even if the decision is risky. And so one of the things you can derive from that, and this is very useful, to contemplate your mortality, so to speak, is you're screwed no matter what you do. And that actually frees you, is that you have path A that has catastrophes, and you have path B that has catastrophes, and you don't get to have the no catastrophe path, but you get to pick which one. And that's really something, because if you know that there's terrible risk associated with everything that you do and don't do, then you can afford to take some risks. And this is all within the ark metaphor. I'm still making the case that despite the fact that your life is essentially catastrophic, you can make a covenant with the highest ideal, and that will take you through it the best way possible. I'm still making that case. So then you think, okay, well, I'm trying to make this decision. I'm going to go try to do something difficult. And isn't that terrifying? And then you think, yeah, but wait a minute. What's really terrifying is not doing it. And then you think about the cost of not doing it. So in the future authoring program, we have people do this little meditative exercise, which is, okay, just think about your insufficiencies by your own definition, the way that you don't do what you know you should do, about the things that you do that you shouldn't do, that you know you shouldn't do beyond a shadow of a doubt. There's some things like that. And that's bad habits and poor aim and all of the resentment and hatred and aggression and unresolved conflicts and all those things that are dementing you and warping you, and then think, okay, those things get the upper hand, man. They get the upper hand, and they take you the worst possible place you could go in the next 3 to 5 years. What exactly does that look like? And so you sketch all that out and you think, hey, I don't want to go there. And so the next time that a temptation comes up, you think, well, it'd be a lot better for me if I didn't succumb to this temptation. It's like, that's kind of weak, eh? You'd look a little better if you didn't eat a cheesecake a day or something like that. That's something, but it's not the same as I'm going to have diabetes and I'm going to lose my damn leg in 5 years if I don't get my eating under control. That's motivating. And so then the temptation comes along and you think, oh, how about no? Not just because a higher good would be obtained if I avoided it, but because a terrible catastrophe would be averted if I didn't. Well, so you want to get your fear behind you. You want to get it behind you where it's pushing you forward instead of in front of you where it's stopping you. And you get your fear behind you, pushing you forward by actually thinking through the consequences of not putting your life together. The least of those is that you waste it and suffer, right? Because you're going to suffer anyways. So you waste it and suffer. That's a bad deal. Because maybe if you're going to suffer, you could at least do something noble and glorious, upright, powerful and honorable and admirable and helpful and difficult. That's just so much better. And maybe that's good enough so that you think, hey, you know, little suffering, it's basically worth it. At least it's a way forward. Well, self-evidently, the world is a catastrophe. There's every reason for you to assume that you should just sit in your basement and hide from it. That's not, it doesn't help. It doesn't make things better. And the thing is, perhaps you're not built for that. You're not built to hide. The rule is aim high and get your bloody act together. That's the rule. And establish this contractual covenant with the ultimate ideal. And that will see you through the catastrophes. And that's a much more mature way of looking at life as far as I'm concerned, because all you have to do is have your eyes half open and you see that the fundamental reality of life is tragedy and suffering. That's inescapable. That doesn't mean that it makes life unbearable or that it makes being something that shouldn't have existed. That isn't what it means. But it means that you have to contend with it and you have to get ready. The willingness to adopt responsibility for yourself and for others is the precondition for that. And then maybe if you do that properly, then now and then you get some happiness. You know, you can sit at the end of a day and you have half an hour where your conscience is clear and there's nothing that you need to be doing, and you can relax and think, you know, that's all right. Things are okay, and thank God for that. And that's maybe where you get your happiness.